So the last topic in this unit is policy management. So, we talked about, different types of policies and enforcement, but enforcement is sort of, one-time effort in a sense that somebody has to, build the software for enforcing the policies. But policy development is something that has to be repeated for every system and every organization and so on. And so it's important to simplify the process of defining and managing these policies. And so we'll talk about uh, you know a few different ways to do this. So the first um, mechanism for doing this is what is called role-based access control. Okay, so uh, so what is a role? So so you often hear that there is nothing in computer science that cannot be solved using an additional level of indirection, and roles provide this kind of an indirection, right? So we also talked about groups when we talked about file permissions, and groups and roles are very closely related. In fact, they are basically the same mechanism, right? So they're exactly the same mechanism, but the way we think about them is different, right? So it's just an interpretation. What do we mean by a role? What do we understand from the word role versus what we understand from a group is a little bit different, right? So a role is a set of permissions, okay? So whereas a group, we think of it as a set of users, okay? So we talk about, okay, who, if there is a group, what are the set of users in the group? Whereas a role is something that's related to, a particular function. And so we can talk about, okay, what permissions does one need in order to carry out this function? So again, the idea is that a particular user may perform certain functions, and then that person is given permissions based on those functions. Okay, and the person may have more than one function or one responsibility, and then they may be given multiple roles, each corresponding to one of the functions that they are supposed to do. So and again, if you think about an organization, the functions assigned to a user may change over time, and therefore what this means is that they may be given some additional roles, or some of their existing roles may be removed over time. Okay, now related to so role-based access control allows a way to manage permissions, and the way it helps in terms of managing is because you don't have to think of what is the permission that I should give to each user, right? You don't have to make this decision on a per user basis, but instead you can just ask, okay, this user, when I hire them, I hire them to carry out functions 1, 2, and 3, and all I need to do is to say, okay, this function is good. This user is going to do functions 1, 2, and 3, and the roles corresponding to those functions have already been defined, and therefore what you don't have to specifically define what permissions they need. You just identify those roles, and then you are done. Okay, so this is how it helps. And once again, when a user leaves, you don't have to go and look at all the permissions that they have and remove them. Instead, you just say, okay, this person doesn't have any of the roles that they used to have, and automatically all the permissions that they used to have are removed. So this is how RBAC helps in terms of policy management. Now, there may be situations where RBAC is not enough. So one of those situations is what is called delegation, right? So delegation means that the owner of a resource or a user that has a certain permission on a certain resource may want to hand over that permission to another user so that the second user can carry out some function. Okay, so for instance, I may hand over some task to my TA, and the TA. So in order to do that, I need to delegate some task to the TA, and then I have to give the TA the associated permissions. So the what I delegate may not be all of my permissions. I may hand over a subset of my permissions to my delegate. So so delegation is of particular importance in a distributed system or a large organization where you need the ability for one user to be able to hand permissions to other users. So for instance, if you have a large organization, the director of a group may want to hand certain permissions to delegate certain permissions to one of his or her subordinates, and they may not want the entire organization to be involved in this delegation, and therefore a more flexible mechanism is needed, and that's why we talk about delegation. So delegation can be implemented using basically public keys and so on. So essentially the idea is that if you want to give certain permission to a delegate, then you can create that permission, and then you can sign that permission using your private key, so that somebody who has to verify whether it's you have truly delegated that permission can actually verify that, because they have your signature on the document that says that the access has been given. So so the trust management is generally a term that is given to a system that provides quite a bit of flexibility in terms of doing delegation and checking the delegation, and also has facilities for saying who can delegate what permission to which user and so on. Okay, but these are fairly advanced concepts that haven't still been deployed to a great extent, and what you see deployed is really RBAC, right? So people haven't gone beyond RBAC, and even RBAC took dozens of years to get traction, because RBAC was developed I think in the 80s, I think, and for many years nobody used even RBAC, but now RBAC is fairly widely used, and I think this came about only in the last 10 or 15 years, although RBAC has been around for maybe 30 or more years. And delegation and trust management are a topic of research now, and I see that coming into play in the next 10, 20 years.